because this is a very important slide because it gets at why people gain weight. And if people can understand, but don't look at what's on the handouts before, no, look, I don't want you to know what's coming. Okay, so all eyes right here. She's studying intensely. I said this is the most important slide, and she's like, she's studying really intensely. That's great. But watch me, all eyes right here. Right here. If people can understand what is on this slide, we wouldn't have an obesity epidemic. Because it really comes down to what's on this slide. This is the most important slide. Oh, wait, well, when are you going to show us the slide, Jason? All right, we eat three things, and I color-coded this, so watch the colors. Match the colors up. We eat carbs, we eat protein, we eat fat. The carbs are used to replenish muscle and liver glycogen, and glycogen is a stored form of glucose. So we store glucose, sugar, in our muscles and in our liver. You just take a bunch of glucose molecules, you string them together, you branch them out like a tree branch, and that's what glycogen is. And we store that in our skeletal muscles and in the liver. So any carbs we eat go to replenish the stored carbohydrate, and also to maintain blood glucose. The protein is for tissue repair, so anytime you have damaged tissue that needs to be repaired, protein does that. Anytime we need to build any structures, like if you lift very heavy weights and you break down muscle, well now you got to rebuild those muscle fibers. So that's protein synthesis. Or if you run long a lot and you stimulate the formation or the growth of mitochondria, that's also protein synthesis. Or making more enzymes, it's all protein synthesis. So that all comes from the protein that we eat, the amino acids from the protein that we eat. And then protein also transports things around. We want to get free fatty acids from our, whatever we're breaking from our adipose tissue into the mitochondria where it can be burned. Protein carries those free fatty acids in. We exercise hard and we produce a lot of lactate. That lactate is transported out of the muscle and goes to a couple of different places, the liver being one of them, the heart being another. Protein has to carry that lactate out. So protein, you can think of protein as your scaffolding. Anytime you walk around the streets, I saw scaffolding on one of the streets downtown yesterday. Anytime buildings are being built, so the scaffolding is your protein. And transportation, cargo is your protein. So protein is used in a lot of different places. And then fat is also used in a variety of places. It's an important component of cell membranes. It's our largest storage form of energy. Even on the thinnest of people, you still have plenty of fat to get you through days and days of starvation. It's used in insulation. So one good thing about being fat is if you live in a cold place, fat people don't get cold as easily because they've got more insulation. You ever see dolphins? I live in San Diego where SeaWorld is a big attraction. We have dolphins. There are famous dolphins at SeaWorld. What do dolphins have a lot of? Starts with a B. Blubber, fat, because it's freezing cold down there in the ocean. So they have to have all this blubber to keep them warm. So fat is used for insulation. And then of course fat is also used to protect our internal organs. We have a layer of fat around our internal organs. So that if somebody tackles you or something while you're walking around and you fall down, you're not going to damage your internal organs because you have this pad of fat around the organ. So it's like this, each organ has padding around it. That's really important. So if we exercise a lot, we have a lot of metabolic demands that need to be met. We do hard, long workouts, and we severely lower muscle glycogen. So any glycogen that we consume through our mouth goes to fulfill this metabolic demand of replacing the lost glycogen, because carbohydrate is the muscle's preferred fuel. So much so that when you run low, that's threatening to the muscle's survival. So any carbohydrates that you consume are going to go to fulfill that metabolic demand. It's a priority. Same thing with protein. If you do a workout that damages muscle fibers or that stimulates the increase in mitochondria or capillaries, and there needs to be protein synthesis, then any protein that you consume over dinner is going to be used to fulfill that metabolic demand, to repair any damaged tissue, to build any structures. But what happens if you don't exercise? That wasn't a hypothetical question. Exactly. Then there's no metabolic demands here. There's no muscle, liver, glycogen to replace. There's no damaged tissue to repair or rebuild. There are no structures to be built. So where does the carbohydrate and the protein and the fat go to? It goes right to Jason's left butt cheek and gets stored as fat. I saw some of you looking at my butt as you entered the room. Proud to say there's no fat on my butt. Being a runner for a very long time gives you a very nice butt. You want the secret to a nice butt? You run. A lot. Sometimes you run up hills, and sometimes you run fast sprints, and that'll give you a very, very, very nice butt. I promise. That's in the second half of the show.
Well, we missed your running with your tights, so, you know.
That's right. If you came this morning, we went for a run, the inner runner, where we talked all about the holistic side of running, the spiritual side of running, how running fills you up inside and makes you a better person. But you missed it! So I put the words up there. It's a metabolic priority. You know what that word priority means? I live in Southern California where people there have no idea what the word priority means. They're all flaky, they miss appointments, they're late all the time. If something better comes up, they do that instead. They don't do what they say they're going to do. Southern California is a beautiful place, but boy, the people there, it's definitely not like where I'm from in New York, in Jersey, where people always do exactly what they say they're going to do, and they understand what priority means. So anyway, priority. Priority means it has to get done, and it has to get done now. And so when you run low on muscle carbohydrate, any carbohydrate you consume goes to replace the muscle carbohydrate. It must get done now because it is threatening to the muscle's survival to run out. I can't say that strongly enough. So if you always do hard and long workouts and you severely lower muscle carbohydrate, then all of the carbohydrate that you consume through your mouth is going to go to fulfill that metabolic priority. And nothing is going to go down the right arrow and get stored as fat. I have a friend who I coached for a little bit when he was had just graduated from college, and he was a really good runner. And he was going to go on to law school, but he took some time off between college and law school, and he was training. And he ultimately went on to make it to the Olympic marathon trials in the U.S. And he would always tell me, Jason, I eat a pound of pasta in one sitting. He couldn't get over how much pasta he could handle. And this guy was 6 feet, 155 pounds. He was rail thin. And he would eat a pound of pasta all at once. But he was also running 100 miles a week. When you run that much, you can eat as much carbohydrate as you want, and none of it is going to go to your left or right butt cheeks. It's all going to go to replace that lost muscle glycogen. And the same thing with the protein. You're always doing hard workouts, you're always going to the gym and damaging muscle tissue, then all the protein that you consume is going to go to rebuild that muscle tissue. So anytime you do a workout, you send a signal to make adaptations. Depending on the kind of workout you do, you're going to have different signals to make different kinds of adaptations. So endurance training, we create signals to make more mitochondria, make more capillaries, make more aerobic enzymes. Signal to heavy strength training is to make more actin and myosin filaments so we get muscle hypertrophy. The adaptation to sprint training is making more of the enzymes involved in glycolysis so we can flux through glycolysis faster and get ATP faster for muscle contraction. And to make adaptations to save our muscles from the acidosis, to combat that acidosis. So there's all kinds of wonderful adaptations you make depending on the nature of the workouts that you do. There's a question back there, yeah.